there, it's Natasha, and thank you so much for joining me today. I recently took a little bit of time off from YouTube and card making, but of course I did manage to do a little bit of shopping during that time, which is something that I don't often do. But over the next few videos I have picked up a couple of pieces that I will be sharing, and you are bound to see these many times. So this is one of them. This is the Concord and 9th Happy Birthday. It's actually called All the Birthdays stamp set. And when I'm going to purchase a stamp set or any piece of tools or equipment or stamps or dies or anything for my craft space, I need to make sure that there are lots of ways that I'm going to be able to use the stamp set. And even given the nature of the stamp set, that it has so many different happy birthdays, I think that I will not struggle with this one. So this is kind of my new happy birthday stamp set, and I'm going to use the one today where there are two different stamp sets that you pop one on top of the other. Not necessarily like I'm doing just here. I do that so that I can line them up perfectly where I know that the other stamp is going to fit in between. But for this one in particular, I'm going to use Clear Skies and Midnight Snack. Now obviously you pop one stamp down first and then you ink that up, and I guess this gives you the chance to easily do a couple of different colors or a few different techniques. So I thought that this was a fun stamp set to start off with. Now I am using a stamping platform. This one happens to be the Mini MISTI, but I don't think you have to at all. I must admit, how these stamps layer up, there is a whole lot of room for play in between them. They don't line up kind of perfectly even. There's no right or wrong way to do it. So that is something else that I like, because aiming for perfection doesn't often work out well for me. So I am going to line these up, and again, as I said, use the stamping platform, but I knew I wanted to stamp the Clear Skies ink twice so that I would get it a little bit darker, because these two blue inks are quite far apart. So there's just a light blue and a dark blue. But anyway, they stamped beautifully. As you can see, they kind of don't line up perfectly, but I like that really nice playful look with this one. I think it would also be really nice to add some gold outlines and things with those stamps that are in the stamp set and heat emboss them, but that's a whole nother card. So these are pretty much almost the only colored paper that I now have in my stash. These are 6 by 3 inches, so obviously they don't cover a whole card front, but they are great for die cutting out of when I don't have the time or I just don't feel like doing up a whole lot of inking. Now I did go ahead and do a whole lot of die cutting, obviously out of those colored paper packs, and I just did this not on film because it is literally just die cutting, but I do want to jazz these up a little bit, and there's a couple of different ways I can do that. One of those ways is that I can use the Hero Arts Unicorn Pigment ink. This is just a white pigment ink. Or I can come in here, these are my sponge daubers, or my finger daubers, sorry, that I use with my oxide inks. And this way we are just going to add a little bit of dimension to our flowers. I'm also going to be using some liquid glue. This is the Ranger Multi-Medium in the matte finish. That's what the glue that I always use. It's in that little bottle. I also have a video on YouTube called How to Fill a Glue Bottle. If you search exactly those words in the title, then it will be the first one that comes up on YouTube. And you can see I'm just going to add a little bit of a darker pink color to this light pink cardstock, and I just kind of brush it around all the petals, and you can see there side by side that it really does make a little bit of difference and just makes them look not quite so flat, which is what I'm going for. I'm certainly not going for perfection, and it doesn't bother me if I get kind of heavier ink spots and lighter ink spots, because in the end I promise that you won't notice them. And that is one flower pretty much finished, except for like the center and things, which I'll do later on. If you don't have the colored inks, then using a white ink is a really good idea. It is a very versatile ink to have in your stash. So on this nice dark red cardstock, I'm going to add the white ink, again just with a finger dauber, the exact same way that I would do with any other colored ink or dye inks or oxide inks, anything. And sometimes I shape the flowers a little bit with my fingers just to give them a little bit more dimension before I glue them one on top of the other. So you could definitely go ahead and add white to all of these pieces of cardstock, the white ink, or you can use like a darker shade of whatever you are already using, Or this one here, I'm actually going to use a purple. I think this is maybe the Wilted Violet finger dauber, and I am just using pretty much what is left on my sponges. That's one thing that I do like about having that little box sitting there. It means that I can pretty much just, if I'm too lazy to get out all of the colors of ink in the actual ink pads, I know that there's probably enough residual ink left on them that I can do little projects here and there, and that's kind of what I do with these flowers. So I just I don't bother searching out the ink pads, I just use whatever ink is left. And then I'm going to put together a couple of these, I guess perhaps they're daisies or who knows what kind of flowers they are. And I just use the lighter and the darker cardstock for these ones as well. Same with these little orange ones. So I didn't do any inking. I got enough dimension from just using the two different colors of cardstock. I think I used the light yellow and the medium yellow from the pack. So once I have put all of my flowers together, I'm actually not going to add any ink to the green foliage. I did a couple of different colors of green for that purpose. I have my card base here, and this is the card front that we stamped at the beginning. It's had a little bit of time to dry now that I have done all the flowers and foliage. I am going to cut this down, and that's why I stamped it near the top of the panel, because I knew I wanted this to be a nice strip that goes down the middle of my card front, and this card is going to be pretty bold and pretty happy birthday and pretty bright. So I have got my card base, as I said, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. I'm going to pop some of my favorite foam tape on the back, but I'm going to pop a couple of strips just pretty much down the middle. I want to make sure that I have plenty of room that I am able to tuck these flowers underneath. So even once I put this down, and I'm just going to eyeball it to see if I can pop it pretty much straight in the middle, and you can see that there is a nice gap there and there's a nice gap at the bottom that I am able to stick things underneath. So if I had put the foam tape right to the edges, it would have meant I had to cut really close, and I think that it might have been able to be seen a little bit easier. So that's why I kept the foam tape to the middle. Now I know this is a little bit sad, but I am going to be cutting most of these flowers. But I guess it means I could get double the fun, because I probably ended up having enough that I could have done 2 cards out of this, very similar to each other, of course. So here I'm just going to kind of play around. I have these larger die cuts which I'm going to cut into smaller ones. Obviously that foliage is too big for what I need on this card, but I am a big fan of kind of changing your dies and cutting things where need be so that they suit us and work for what the project that we're working on. So I am going to cut pretty much the flowers in half. Some of them I cut kind of more 2/3, 1/3, just so that a little bit can pop over the top as well. And I'm really just having a play around. I don't want 2 colors that are next to each other. I know that this looks kind of empty and a bit sparse at the moment, but I promise once you get the green foliage in here that the card is going to come together really nicely. So make sure that you don't give up at any point, even if it's not quite what you were imagining when you set out to create the card. So I am just, as I said, fiddling around, cutting off some bits and pieces, popping them in and having a play around with what I want to go where. And then once I think I have everything, nothing is glued in at the moment, it's all just sitting there. And that means that I can shift things around as I please. And as I said, it will all come together, I promise. Now, I would think for this card that if you have been doing card making for a little while, you pretty much have everything in your stash that you are able to create this card. Some flower dies, or you can use some stamps if you have flower stamps, and you could even fussy cut them out and layer some up so that some of the petals are a bit dimensional. That's one of my favorite things to do. Any happy birthday stamp or die cuts, or even some pattern paper cut out, anything. You could use stickers for the words in the middle, anything, and you are going to be able to create something similar to this card. This is just meant to be some general inspiration, and this card was meant to be bright and bold and colourful. So I think I achieved that with this one, and I was really happy with how this turned out. I've got pretty much all the foliage stuck in. I have glued everything down with the matte medium so that I know that it is definitely not going anywhere. I chose to use some enamel dots to fill in the centers of these flowers just because that was the least messy option, and I didn't want to have to wait for Nuvo drops to dry or anything like that. So I'm just popping a little one in the middle of each of the flowers, and already it's these kind of details that really take the card to the next level. I am going to pop a couple of little blue ones here and there around the sentiment just because it's blue, and then the last thing that I need to do is take off the excess flowers that are hanging over the edge, because this one will need to go in an envelope, so I know that I need to trim off those excess little bits and pieces, and it kind of tidies everything up and keeps it all really kind of nice and clean around the edges. So although it can kind of seem like a bit of a shame to cut off some of your flowers, I think it does tidy up the card a lot. So anyway, that was my card for today. I hope you have enjoyed creating this bright, bold card with me. I will leave links to everything down in the description box below, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks, bye!